All right, it's time for me to start the next step in the process, and that's to start to get all the relationships between the distance of the center of the wheel hole here and the front edge of the structure that I'm going to maintain, so that I have a nice place to mark it on the new chassis as to where it's actually going to come down. And then from there, I'll be making some patterns of the door structure at the door jamb to try and cut away as much material as I can ahead of time. Granted, there's probably going to be a couple of test fits up and down, to try and remove a little bit more material as I drop the body down. But I like to get as much material out of the way as possible ahead of time to minimize the amount of time I have to lift the body off the new chassis. With that said, the first thing I want to establish is I want to establish that the wheelbase on this old car is correct. It's 117 inches, just measuring from the edge of the rim in the front or the rear to the front or the rear of the front tire. In other words, pick a spot here in the front and then go to the front of the front rim and check the wheelbase. It should be 117 inches on the old car. This one is. And make sure that your wheels in the front are straight as possible to establish that that's correct, because this could be like on the other side of this car. It's the leaf spring is missing, so that side is not accurate. This side's still held by the leaf spring, so I wanted to make sure that if I use this center line of this tire as a reference point for this wheel hole, that it'll be in the correct neighborhood. With that said, the new car is 116-inch wheelbase as opposed to 117, so that I'll have to compensate a little bit in the front and a little bit of the back. And then also the wheel holes will have to be widened because we have 20-inch wheels and tires on these, the new car. So these holes have to be significantly larger in order to accommodate that. But in the meantime, I'd just like to get the body's relationship to the wheels and tires correct. With that said, I'll start with picking a point over here, using the top of the pinch weld as my reference as far as up and down. And then I'll square off the frame and I'll measure back to the center of the tire from this area over here to establish this point here. In other words, vertically, and then I'll come across this way, and that'll give me the center line. So that'll give me then, by virtue of that, will give me the relationship between the front of this structure here and the center line here, and it tells me where I have to line up on the new chassis. Anyway, I'll get started with that. Before taking measurements on the car, I like to level the car as best I can for references. I don't have a surface plate, which is the ideal way to do that. If you've got a perfectly level steel surface plate, you can measure off of that for references. But in lieu of that, the next best thing is to try and level the car somewhat, so you have at least a good start point as far as your measurements are concerned. And what I do is just level it up on jack stands as best as I can, front to rear, and then to do the side to side, I'll start with the front by leveling across the front, and simply I have these squares cut out of different thicknesses of plywood, 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch, 3/8 of an inch, and I'll slide them underneath the base of the jack stands in order to get it level side to side in the front. Now it still may be out of level at the rear of the car, so then I'll go one step further and I'll go to the rear of the car and level the rear of the car by just adding some more spacers possibly to this rear jack stand, because there might be a little bit of a twist by virtue of the floor. So getting it level and is the best way to start getting some references. It's also roughly leveled front to rear based on leveling out this pinch weld. That way I'll be able to go over to the other car and level the pinch weld and the car over there, and then I'll be accurate as far as my references are concerned. At the back of the car, I'm using the package tray as far back as I can push the level so that it sits just on the ends of the package tray and it's not rocking and rolling on the stamping to level the back of the car. Finally, I just go back to the sill plates and level them to make sure that they're still in the neighborhood. They may not be 100% perfect as far as dead level, based on the fact that that surface is a little irregular, and so are the pinch welds. But as long as it's not screaming out of whack, you can get started with taking the measurements. Okay, using this adjustable body stand, I've picked a point that's about 3.5 inches up from the pinch weld, marked it on my framing square. That'll give me a common spot to pick on this shape, which obviously is, it's not level, it's not square, and it's got a round feature to the bottom of it. So I have to use the pinch weld itself as a reference and then measure up from there to get a spot to start using as a reference. Also, since this is the same dimension as this rod here, I went and squared this off of the bottom of the pinch weld to make sure that this is located in the right position. In other words, it's not twisted this way or that way, so that I can run a tape measure from a point here level across to check my dimension to the center of the wheel in the back. Okay, I've established that this point, this back edge of this pinch weld on this side firewall, or this door jamb I should say, is 84 inches, 84.5 inches to the center line of the tire in the rear of the wheel. So being this is a 117-inch car, that's 116. I'm going to split a 1/2 inch on either end. It doesn't really matter a whole lot because I'll be opening up the wells and the wheel openings, I should say, significantly. But just to 50-50 it and sacrifice the equal amount from both front and rear wheel openings. Since this is 84.5, I will set it at this feature at 84 inches. From the center line of the wheel on the new car. All right, you can see the blue mark on the frame rail. That's 84 inches even from the center of the rear wheel. So now I have a reference point as to where that back edge of the pinch weld on the door jamb should land. From that measurement, I can measure forward and extrapolate where the front of that, the rest of that structure should end up on the frame rail. It's about 6.5 inches wide, so just got to move along, put another line right there, and that's where the structure needs to land, front to rear, on this car. Okay, so I went and made a pattern out of some masonite, 1/8 inch masonite, real quick, and I through bolted just a small board on the bottom there in order to allow me to sit it right on top of the pinch weld on the other car, so pinch welds will be matching. And I marked the height of this feature right here. Anyway, what that allows me to do is take this over here and set it on the pinch weld like that, and then line it up level with that mark right there, and this gives me an idea of the amount of material that I have to clear out in order for the body to land in this spot right here. So everything that you see all the way back to this inner firewall here that's exposed by this pattern has to be cleared away. Now I'm going to have to make another pattern that shows the lean of the door jamb and defines that, so I'll be able to figure out how far in I have to go cutting out the substructure for the dashboard. This also gives me an idea what I have to clear out of the way on the back side, because it's a much different door profile on the Challenger than on the Charger. So just thought I'd show you that. Anyway, we'll go on from here. Okay, that little yellow piece of tape with the blue mark on it, where that comes into play is now I have this mark on the frame rail, and I just take my level and go level up from that, and that aligns now with my mark on the other car. That translates directly back to the center of the hub. Alright, after drawing my pattern out, you can see right there I added another inch, and as you can also see, this cut line runs right through the mount bolt for the emergency brake. Now there's two more at the firewall. This one just stabilizes it, so it'll have to be replaced. In the meantime, I'm going to drill out these spot welds and recover these weld nuts from the back side. These three are to secure the dash frame, and this one is, like I said, for the emergency brake. In the meantime, on the back side, I've had to cut out this material to get it away from where I'm going to be cutting. This is just holding in, it covers this matting that's sound deadener. So I'm just cutting out the minimal amount along here, trying to keep that neat if that's possible. Anyway, the emergency brake pedal, held on by this and two other nuts, had a spacer here, which could work to our advantage basically, because when this panel moves in a little bit, hopefully it won't have to move in too far, and just remove the spacer, and we'll reintroduce that weld nut to the back side there, and hopefully that'll be plenty out of the way of the structure that's coming in over top of it. Now, as far as these three bolts are concerned, to take them out, so what I did was I mounted a rod here down to the seat mounting bolt and just screwed it to the dash. And the reason I'm bothering with this is because you want to be able to take this structure out to service anything under there that doesn't want to come out, like the heating and air conditioning system that's under there. If you ever needed to change that, you have to take this whole structure out. So you don't want to make it so you can't get to this stuff. So I have to create a new mounting surface over here that's inboard of where we are right now. Anyway, that's where we're at right now. Okay, a little bit of oversight that I had. I was cutting out this flange over here, and once I got it free, the dash frame dropped about 1/8 of an inch or so and leaned forward. So I bolted the flange back to the inner structure, and then I jacked the whole thing back up into location, and I added another reinforcements stop, just welded it from the frame down to the side rail over here, just to keep it up in its location. Okay, so I've set my pattern back in the door opening, and I've added a stiffener to this section over here, just a piece of angle aluminum pop riveted, because this is only 1/8 inch masonite, and you know, it's pretty floppy, has a little bit of a bow to it. And I want to get an accurate reading as to how far that door is leaning in, all the way up to the base of the A-post. And I've taken my my body stand here, and I've made a little angle bracket, and I've clamped both to it to hold it in position. So it's sitting down on the pinch weld, and it's leaning in. And now I'll just get a smart level and put it on there and find out how many degrees it's leaning in, and try and match it over on the other car. Okay, it's leaned in 84.5 degrees, which that's what the other car is now, give or take a half a degree or so. Again, this is a rough cut, trying to get as much out of the way as possible before I even get started dropping the body. As you can see, it crosses over here, so I'll have to eliminate some of this material here. All of this flange up here will have to go, and cut it on a diagonal so that like I said, if you have to pull that dash frame out, I'll have to eliminate this flange all the way down to about here, to where you see this starts to cross over here, so that you'll be able to, like I said, pull it out. And I'll have to create some mounting points for it before I go to the other side. Some of this material here may have to come away also. We haven't determined that yet. Quick reminder, this all looks like genius stuff until I get the thing dropped and I'm in there with a blowtorch trying to cut everything out that I forgot. So I'm just trying to get as much as what I can see ahead of time out of the way. There's always going to be something that's going to get hung up on, at least for me. I've had that experience more than once. Okay, so this is the area I'm working on now. I've cut this out, squared it up, so it's easier to make a bracket for it. And what we want to pick up is we want to pick up the dash frame. We want to secure it back to the car. We also want to recess a fitting to put the emergency brake and fasten it back to the car. So I came up with one bracket that pretty much does everything. I bent it. It's like 060 steel. And then I welded a flange onto the front face. I salvaged the weld nuts from the flanges that I cut off the car, also the weld nut that secured the emergency brake. And this piece is going to fit right in here. I'm going to weld that up, and what I'll do is I'll bolt it to the fixture, or bolt it to the dashboard first, and also to the emergency brake, and then I'll tack it in place, and I'll show you that. Okay, so it's welded in now. So the emergency brake is bolted to this bracket here now, and the dash subframe is also bolted to that. This is welded to the car now. I added this piece of 049 wall 1 inch by 1 inch tubing that is tied to the frame rail at the bottom, and also tack welded to this inner layer of sheet metal, because it's just one layer thick at this point. So normally this would be a lot of strength, a lot of boxing going on here, and I don't know what kind of opportunities I'll have to strengthen that up after the other body's on. So rather than gamble, I went ahead and put some strength back into it right now. Anyway, that's where we're at with this. Not having to take the emergency brake into consideration on the right-hand side of the car, it was a much simpler bracket that I had to build. Same approach was taken. There's a flat flange. The capture nuts were welded to the back side, bolted up. Then this plate was welded to that plate. The whole thing was taken back off, welded up properly, set back into place, bolts put back in, and then welded back to the car. This time I put this bar in first to make sure that this thing was vertical the way it needs to be, and so that side's done. So for me, it's important to establish a common measuring point for different aspects of the car. In this case, I'm using the top of the pinch welds on both cars as the common point of measurement. So everything relates to the top of the pinch welds here. As far as my heights and my other distances. So that's why it's important to get the car level in both directions as far as this particular measurement is concerned, because then you can follow through very easily with just, as you can see, I've compensated for the height of the transmission and drive shaft tunnel by putting spacers under here so that this bar goes level across the car, and then I've compensated for some other obstructions here with another spacer under the level. So now I'm level in this direction, I'm level across here. Now I have another level, small level, that I have set up on the package tray, and I can now have a reference point, level down and measure to here, and then subtract out all of my spacers, and I can find the height relationship between the top of the package tray and the pinch weld, go to the other car and see if I've got any major interference, and that's really all I'm looking for right now. I mean, when you have this many aspects going in this many directions, there's bound to be a slight error, quarter inch, eighth of an inch, but it gets you in the neighborhood, and that's all I'm looking for right now. Well, unless I've done something wrong, which is very possible, and it'll evidence itself as soon as I go to try and fit this thing together. It appears that the package tray in the old car is about an inch and 5/8 above this height of the remnants of the old package tray in the new car. So with that in mind, it's showing me that the top of this wheel tub, which was here to accommodate the fill cap, is about that much too high. It has to be cut down. I'll cut it lower just to be safe, but who knows whether that'll be enough or not 100%. On this side over here, I'd rather not tamper with this too much, but this is showing this is about 1/4 of an inch lower than this block right now, so I may just shave down the excess of this flange here and see if we clear. If not, then we'll shave it off as we go. Also, I was trying to preserve the part of the belt attachments for this car for the rear seats. That's what this pocket's all about. But after talking to the owner, it's not going to be something where there'll be kids in the rear seat or anything like that, so we're not going to bother with that extra work. If you wanted to put the belts in, you'd have to probably re-engineer the belt pockets back here, which is not a big deal. I did that on my Daytona. And then you'd have to put in some strong points on top of this package tray in the old car in order to attach the belts on top too. But that's extra work. He doesn't ever foresee a situation where he's going to be carrying kids around in the back seat, so we're going to forget that and forgo that extra work. Also, one of the things, just trimming away now, they can be left on there, I guess, but they'll be in the way, and they eventually have to go, is these large rear mufflers. I guess they're resonators, mufflers, whatever. As you can see on the old car, the profile of the quarter panel is much more slender, top to bottom. Those things would stick down, well, somewhere's in this neighborhood. So this side here is already trimmed away, and that's one of the last things I have to do before I start piddling around with the old car. Whenever I get a chance to put things back in order on the car, I try to. This is less for me to do later as far as being confused about what goes where. Now I pulled popped all these wires, harnesses away and pulled them all inboard while I was doing all that welding on the frame rail. That's all done now. So it's time to re-clip all of these wires back. Well, we've got this new frame rail in here which blocks all of the little clip holes. They're about 1/4 of an inch holes that are all along here. These little plastic clips just push into. So got to go back, re-drill those holes, and go along and just pop all these back in, and that'll be back in place and neat, and it won't look like a mess. Okay, so I'm going to end this video right here. I've got as much preliminary work done as far as getting this prepped as I want to. There's more prep work that has to be done forward of the firewall and involving the firewall. But we're going to leave that go for now because it doesn't concern me just yet. So next I have to start turning my attention to the older car. I have to mount everything up on it and make sure that I can get some dimensions so that once it's all cut away, if it sags or moves or does anything, I'll have some reference marks. So that's my next mission. Thanks for watching.